Hook, shame has a sound, 'tis the soft click of a man walking away with your worth in his pocket. I have lived through many storms, but only one ever taught me what it truly means to be unmade. My name is Serena Caldwell, though the world has called me many other things, none of them as soft or as graceful as what my mother intended. I was 17 when the story of my undoing began. Young, pretty, hopeful, and foolish enough to believe that love was simply a warm hand on your cheek and a promise whispered beneath streetlights. His name was Marcus Hale, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that could part the darkest clouds. He spoke to me like I was a secret heaven he alone had been chosen to enter. And like a fool I opened the gates. For a season I fed his dreams as if they were my own. I encouraged him when the world tired him. I lifted him when life pressed him low. I believed he would do the same for me. But love, raw, naive love, can blind even the sharpest soul. When I told him I was carrying his child, his eyes changed. The boy I loved died in an instant, replaced by a man who feared responsibility more than he feared losing me. "Serena," he said, "don't put this on me." He said it with that careless shrug men use when they wish to detach themselves from the pieces of your crumbling heart. Then he turned away, and I swear to this day I still hear it. The sound of a man walking away with your worth in his pocket. Word spread swiftly through our community, faster than lightning and twice as cruel. They say she trapped him. She wanted his money. She's lying. She's after benefits. Pretty girls like her always have motives. Oh, how the world loves to feast on a woman's wounded dignity. But no one saw the truth hidden behind the curtains of my quiet home. No one saw how I worked morning shifts, evening shifts, night shifts, anything to keep my unborn daughter safe. No one saw how Marcus would call at odd hours, asking for help, for food, for encouragement. And I, soft-hearted fool that I was, still gave it. I carried him long after he dropped me. His success, I fed it. His confidence, I built it. His dreams, I breathed life into them. And yet, when life asked him to stand beside me, he fled as though the very sight of responsibility were a fire licking at his heels. Pregnant, alone, and branded with the scarlet rumors of people who had never even heard the sound of my laughter. So, in that darkness, something within me hardened, strengthened, lit like a torch in the rain. I would not break. My daughter, still unborn, became my anchor and my reason. And shame, rather than drown me, became the soil in which my strength began to grow roots. For that was the day I learned. A woman's heartbreak is often the birthplace of her power. And though I did not know it then, the path of pain I walked would one day collide with a world of shadows, secrets, money, and blood. A world where even shame would kneel before me. But for now, this is where my story begins. A neighborhood can betray you just as sharply as a sword, and gossip. Gossip is the whisper that becomes a weapon. If the world were fair, the truth would have defended me. But fairness is a luxury the poor seldom taste. My story did not unfold in a village with drums and bonfires. No, it happened in a cramped American neighborhood where gossip grows faster than weeds on an untended lawn. Where front porches become courts, neighbors become judges, and rumors spread like wildfire between cracked sidewalks and cheap picket fences. When Marcus Hale abandoned me, he didn't just leave. He left a story behind, and his family believed it. Serena is trying to trap our son. She wants money. She wants the Hale name. They swallowed his lies like communion. And the neighborhood, ever hungry for something to chew, devoured me next. I became the soft girl with the swelling belly they whispered about behind painted nails and half-closed blinds. Such a shame. She was always too pretty for her own good. He said she begged him to stay. My cousin said she refused to use protection. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine being the villain in a tale you didn't write. But while they sharpened their tongues, my family sharpened their loyalty. We had little. A 2-bedroom apartment where walls were thin enough to hear your neighbor sneeze. And the fridge sometimes hummed louder than our hope. But my parents wrapped me in love as though it were silk. My mother worked double shifts at a diner, the kind where the smell of bacon and exhausted dreams stuck to your clothes. My father, tired but determined, fixed broken things around the neighborhood for a few dollars tossed into his calloused hands. And together they held me through the storm. "Serena, we got you," my mother said, cupping my face like it was something tender and holy. "You're not alone," my father added, his voice rough but steady. "Let them talk. Words don't raise babies. People do. I worked too. I had to. Morning shift at a laundromat where dryers rattled louder than my heartbeat. Evening shift cleaning offices where the carpet smelled of chemicals and disappointment. Night shift at a grocery store stocking shelves while my feet screamed beneath me. Some nights the exhaustion blurred my vision. Some nights the shame pressed so heavy I thought it might crack my ribs. But then, in the quiet hours of dawn, when the world blinked slowly awake, and my little girl shifted inside me, light touched the darkness. When she was born I held her and knew God had not forgotten me. Her cry was the first truth I had heard in months. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine like she already knew my heart had been shattered and she intended to stitch it back together. I named her Arya, because her arrival felt like music after months of noise. In that moment something in me changed. Hope was not a man. I had learned that. Hope was a child. Hope was breath. Hope was survival. And as I stood in that hospital room, hair messy, eyes swollen, heart raw, I made a vow that cut deeper than any oath I had ever spoken. No man. No romance. No exceptions. Love had cost me everything. My dignity, my peace, my place in the neighborhood. But Arya had given me back the one thing Marcus could never steal. Purpose. And so I raised her with the quiet fierceness of a woman who had been betrayed by the world. And rebuilt by her own blood. Little did I know, the same neighborhood that mocked me would one day whisper my name for an entirely different reason. For destiny was already stirring its pot. And in the darkest shadows of the city, men with power, blood, and secrets were beginning to look in my direction. But on that day, I was only a young mother, holding my child like she was both sword and shield, believing, foolishly, beautifully, that the worst was already behind me. If only I had known. The storm had not yet begun. Sometimes God whispers warnings through the mouths of children, soft, trembling, easily dismissed. That morning should have been ordinary. A Tuesday. A day meant for clocking in, clocking out, and pretending the world could not still bruise me. But the sun rose strangely muted, as if it had been scolded into dimming itself. But the sun rose strangely muted, as if it had been scolded into dimming itself. Even the air felt heavier, thick, slow, expectant, like the sky was holding its breath. I was tying my work shoes when I felt it. Her small hand tugging at my shirt. "Mommy." Her voice cracked like something inside her was breaking open. I turned and there she stood. My Arya, 5 years old, curls a wild halo around her tear-stained cheeks. She didn't just cry. She clung. Fingers digging into my skin as though letting go of me would send the world spinning off its axis. "Please don't go," she whispered. "Mommy, stay with me today." She'd never begged before. Not like this. Not with her whole little soul trembling in her hands. A chill crept up my spine. The kind of chill that doesn't come from cold. The kind that comes from knowing even if you can't say what you know. I knelt down and cupped her warm cheeks. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He shook her head hard. "I don't know. I just..." Her breath hitched. I woke up scared. "I want you. Don't go, Mommy. Don't go today." Her plea sliced through me with a precision no blade could match. For a moment, just a moment, I almost stayed. But bills don't care about feelings. Rent doesn't pause for intuition. Fear doesn't stop the clock-in machine from blinking 8 a.m. So I held her tighter, close enough to feel her heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. "It's okay, baby," I murmured, rocking her gently. "Mama's right here. Nothing's going to happen." Why? A soft, necessary lie. I carried her to my bed and laid her down, brushing her curls away from her face. She wouldn't release my hand until her breathing softened, slowed, and slipped into sleep. Even then, she kept her small fist curled around the edge of my shirt, as if afraid I might evaporate. I waited until her grip loosened. I kissed her forehead, and I walked out. But as I stepped into the hallway, a cold weight pressed against my chest. I should warn them, I thought. My parents. My sister. Tell them to watch the doors. Lock everything. Pay attention. But time tugged at me. Responsibility pulled me harder. And intuition, like all warnings from God, was too easy to dismiss in the light of day. So I shrugged off the feeling like brushing away a fly. I grabbed my keys. I shut the door. I left. And as the lock clicked behind me, sound too sharp, too final, I didn't realize. I had walked straight out of safety and left my entire world inside. If I had listened to her tiny trembling voice, if I had let one morning's strange heaviness matter, the horrors waiting on the other side of the day might never have found us. But fate is a patient hunter, and that morning, it had just begun stalking. Sometimes God whispers warnings through the mouths of children, soft, trembling, easily dismissed. That morning should have been ordinary. A Tuesday. A day meant for clocking in, clocking out, and pretending the world could not still bruise me. But the sun rose strangely muted, as if it had been scolded into dimming itself. Even the air felt heavier, thick, slow, expectant, like the sky was holding its breath. I was tying my work shoes when I felt it, her small hand tugging at my shirt. "Mommy." Her voice cracked like something inside her was breaking open. I turned, and there she stood. My Arya, 5 years old, curls a wild halo around her tear-stained cheeks. She didn't just cry. She clung, fingers digging into my skin as though letting go of me would send the world spinning off its axis. "Please don't go," she whispered. "Mommy, stay with me today." She'd never begged before. Not like this. Not with her whole little soul trembling in her hands. A chill crept up my spine. The kind of chill that doesn't come from cold. The kind that comes from knowing even if you can't say what you know. I knelt down and cupped her warm cheeks. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He shook her head hard. "I don't know. I just..." Her breath hitched. I woke up scared. "I want you. Don't go, Mommy. Don't go today." Her plea sliced through me with a precision no blade could match. For a moment, just a moment, I almost stayed. But bills don't care about feelings. Rent doesn't pause for intuition. Fear doesn't stop the clock-in machine from blinking 8 a.m. So I held her tighter, close enough to feel her heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. "It's okay, baby," I murmured, rocking her gently. "Mama's right here. Nothing's going to happen." Why? A soft, necessary lie. I carried her to my bed and laid her down, brushing her curls away from her face. She wouldn't release my hand until her breathing softened, slowed, and slipped into sleep. Even then, she kept her small fist curled around the edge of my shirt, as if afraid I might evaporate. I waited until her grip loosened. I kissed her forehead, and I walked out. But as I stepped into the hallway, a cold weight pressed against my chest. I should warn them, I thought. My parents, my sister. Tell them to watch the doors. Lock everything. Pay attention. But time tugged at me. Responsibility pulled me harder. And intuition, like all warnings from God, was too easy to dismiss in the light of day. So I shrugged off the feeling like brushing away a fly. I grabbed my keys. I shut the door. I left. And as the lock clicked behind me, sound too sharp, too final, I didn't realize I had walked straight out of safety and left my entire world inside. If I had listened to her tiny trembling voice, if I had let one morning's strange heaviness matter, the horrors waiting on the other side of the day might never have found us. But fate is a patient hunter, and that morning, it had just begun stalking. Evil does not knock like a monster. It knocks like a man asking for help. I was not home when the stranger came. I would hear the story later, shaking, fragmented, told through my father's trembling breath and my mother's broken attempt to be brave. But this is my autobiography, and my father's terror lives inside my memories now. So I will tell it to you as he told it to me, with his eyes still red and his hands still shaking. It began with a knock. Not a loud one. Not violent. It's wrong. A knock too soft for danger, too timed for coincidence. My father, gentle to a fault, the kind of man whose compassion outran his common sense, opened the door without suspicion. And there he stood, a stranger, bruised, bleeding, breathless, shoulders hunched as though the world itself had been chasing him. In his hand, a dark suitcase worn at the edges, heavy enough to bend his wrist. "So, please," the man croaked. "Help me." My father swears it was the desperation in his eyes that broke him. A man drowning will grab anything, even a stranger's mercy. He pulled him inside, helped him to the chair, asked nothing, offered water. Human decency. Such a simple thing. Such a fatal thing. Because the moment my father turned his head, the stranger's voice changed. His posture straightened. His hand dipped into his waistband, and a gun appeared. Well, but heavy enough to rewrite our entire lives. My mother froze mid-step. My sister's scream died in her throat. Arya clung to my mother's leg, sensing danger without understanding it. "Everyone stay still," the stranger ordered. "No one needs to get hurt." But people always get hurt when a man who calls himself harmless says things like that. He dragged the suitcase closer, then kicked it open. Bundles, stacks, bricks of money stared back at my family, cold and cruel as winter. "Transfer it," he demanded. "Put everything into this." He tossed another bag to my father. An expensive-looking duffel pulled from his own waistband, as if he had worn wealth next to his skin. My father's hands shook so hard he could barely unzip it. "Hurry," the stranger snapped. 3 minutes. 3 minutes to survive. 3 minutes to obey. 3 minutes to unknowingly step into someone else's war. Cash thudded into the new bag. My mother whispered prayers. My sister held Arya's face against her chest so she wouldn't see the gun. And then, as calmly as if he were borrowing sugar, the stranger peeled off his bloody shirt and reached for my father's fresh laundry drying by the hallway. He put on my father's shirt, my father's pants, my father's cap, transformed himself into an imitation of the man who saved him. "Thanks," he muttered, breathing steadier, eyes colder. With the duffel of stolen money in hand, he ran out the back door and vanished into the bright daylight, like a nightmare pretending to be real. Silence fell. Heavy, hollow, thud. My father turned to lock the door, but he never reached it. As seconds later, before anyone could even exhale, boom, boom, the front door burst open. Black boots, dark coats, armed men, 6 of them, flooded our living room like a storm. "Where is the money? Who took the case? Where is he?" My father raised his hands, stuttering, trying to explain. He came in, he forced us, he took my clothes." The leader sneered. "You expect me to believe that story, old man?" Before my father could finish the sentence, frick, the butt of a gun slammed into his skull. He fell. A sound I will never forget, even though I wasn't there to hear it, because the echo of it has lived inside my chest ever since. My mother lunged forward, screaming. They shoved her back. My sister covered Arya's eyes again, but the child still heard everything. Another blow. Another order. Another threat. And then, darkness. My father's world went black. My family's nightmare began. And I, walking home from work, tired, unaware, thinking my daughter was simply having a sensitive morning, had no idea that every breath I took was carrying me closer to hell. There are rooms where light refuses to enter, rooms that swallow hope whole. I do not remember being taken. Not yet. That part belongs to later. This part, this darkness, this horror, belongs to my father. Everything I know of it, he whispered to me afterward, voice trembling like an old window in a storm. I speak it now, because his memory is mine, and his terror deserves its place in my story. He told me the first thing he felt was cold. Not the kind that chills skin. The kind that crawls into your bones and settles, as if death itself is breathing over your shoulder. When he opened his eyes, the world was black. Not night black, but warehouse black. A darkness too heavy, too thick, as if the air had weight. Then the smell hit him. Rot. Old sweat. Damp concrete. Something metallic. Something like fear left too long in the sun. And when his eyes adjusted, he saw them. Bones. Human bones. Scattered. Feck. Thrown aside like trash that once had a heartbeat. He tried to scream, but his mouth was tied. Thick rope dug into his skin. Wrists bound behind him so tight he could feel his pulse fighting the knots. When his vision cleared, he saw them. My mother. My sister. And in the corner, tiny and trembling, my little girl. My daughter. 5 years old. Too scared to stand. Not tied like the rest, but frozen. Legs curled beneath her like she'd been dropped there and forgotten. Her cheeks streaked with dried tears. Her breath shaky, uneven. Her eyes wide and wild, darting like a trapped animal's. A man, a guard, had offered her water. She shoved it away. Offered her crackers. She slapped them from his hand. My daughter, my stubborn, righteous, terrified baby, refused to eat a single crumb from strangers. Even hunger could not make her trust them. My father tried to call to her, but the gag silenced every attempt. His body shook so violently he thought his bones might break like the ones on the floor beside him. He told me the worst part was her eyes. How they kept searching the room, looking for something that wasn't there, looking for me. And I, unaware, unprepared, unforgiven, was walking toward home, believing I would find my mother cooking, my father fixing something with his old tools, my daughter napping with her curls scattered like a crown. But when I opened the front door, silence greeted me. Not peaceful silence, not tired silence, hollow silence, the kind that feels like standing inside a wound. The living room was too still, the air too stale. Something in the atmosphere felt wrong, like a violin string pulled too tight, ready to snap. My heart began to race with no reason I could name. Mom. No answer. Dad. Nothing. Arya. Only the echo of my own voice. I dropped my bag on the floor. A soft thud that sounded like a scream in the quiet. Every instinct clawed at me. The same heaviness my daughter had felt that morning now pressed against my spine. I stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered above me, weak, uncertain. That's when the landline rang. A sharp, sudden sound that made my blood turn cold. I lifted the receiver with trembling fingers. Hello. A footstep behind me. Then a hand, rough, gloved, clamped over my mouth. A cloth pressed against my nose. Sweet. Chemical. Suffocating. I tried to fight. Tried to twist away. Tried to scream. But the world tilted. My knees buckled. My vision blurred. The last thing I saw was the hallway swimming into darkness. And the last thought that clawed through the fog was not of death, but of my daughter's tearful little voice. Mommy, stay with me today. And then, nothing. A blackout. Thick as night. Cold as betrayal. Silent as a grave. Some faces teach you what fear truly looks like. His taught me what fear worships. I woke with my cheek pressed to concrete. Cold, damp, merciless. And rope biting into my wrists like teeth made of fire. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I heard the sound. My mother's shaky breath. My father's muffled groan. And the soft, terrified whimper of my daughter. I turned my head, slow, heavy, aching, and saw them tied beside me. The sight so violent to my heart that it felt like my ribs cracked around it. My daughter was curled against my mother's side. Too young to understand. Too frightened to move. Her small fingers dug into my mother's shirt. As if holding fabric could anchor her to this world. I whispered her name. She opened her eyes. And the moment she saw me awake, tears rushed down her cheeks like they'd been waiting. Mommy. Barely a breath. Barely a sound. A prayer wearing the disguise of a word. Before I could speak, a heavy metallic boom slammed through the warehouse, echoing like thunder trapped indoors. A door. Opening. Footsteps followed. Slow, deliberate, echoing across the concrete. Each step was the kind that announces a man who has never once hurried, because the world always waits for him. I lifted my head, and I saw him, the man of scars. His face looked carved rather than born, a roadmap of healed wounds, gashes that had turned into grotesque ridges, skin pulled and twisted like a cruel artist had molded him with broken glass. One eye drooped, the other burned with a cruel, patient intelligence. I did not scream. My body betrayed me, the horror too sharp. My stomach heaved once, twice, and then I vomited onto the concrete. The guard stepped back. The scarred man did not. He walked closer, stopping just inches from me, letting his shadow swallow my shaking form. His voice was smoother than I expected. Deep, calm, almost polite. The kind of voice you'd hear from a banker, explaining the terms of a loan you could never repay. Your father, he said, tilting his head toward the trembling man bound beside me, lost me a great deal of money today. My father sobbed behind his gag, his whole body shaking. The scarred man continued. The suitcase held money meant for a trade. Money gone. He snapped his fingers. Just like that. As if lives were disposable as dust. You will repay it. My father tried to speak. His words died beneath the cloth. My mother cried silently. Her face crumpled in helpless prayer. Even my daughter, brave little heartbeat that she was, whimpered and reached for me through the rope. The man crouched in front of me, his scarred face filling my entire world. You have 3 months, he said quietly, or they die. 3 months. For an amount even 10 years of my labor could not touch. My lungs squeezed. My vision swam. He looked at my daughter, then at my parents, and then he pointed directly at me. You, he said, his voice turning sharp as a blade drawn in candlelight, will work for me. He paused. The warehouse held its breath. Carrot or they die. The silence that followed was so absolute. I could hear my heart break. Not quietly. Not poetically. Loud. Ugly. Like a bone snapping. And in that moment, life as I knew it ended. And a new, darker chapter began. Some choices aren't choices at all. Just the quiet surrender of a heart held hostage. They untied me only long enough to drag me into a smaller room. A concrete cell with one flickering bulb. And a metal chair that looked like it remembered other people's screams. My wrists throbbed. My face was wet. I didn't know if it was sweat, tears, or the remnants of terror still clinging to me. I sat because I had no strength left not to. The door opened again. Not the scarred boss this time. A younger man entered. Sharp jaw, cold eyes, suit too clean for this graveyard of a warehouse. He carried a phone in one hand, and the scent of arrogance in the other. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. Power wears its own name. He lifted the phone, typed something quickly, then angled the screen toward me. A message. Short, direct. Proof. If you want your family to live, prove you're perfect for the task. He didn't speak it. He texted it. As if my life were an application form. I swallowed hard, my throat raw from fear and vomit and the pulse of a heart that refused to slow. What task? My voice cracked. A fragile sound I didn't recognize as my own. He circled me like a recruiter choosing a soldier. Except I hadn't enlisted in this war. This war drafted me. You will infiltrate a man, he said. Miles Vescary. The name dropped into the room like a blade. Even his whisper carried weight. The kind of weight only a feared mafia leader's name could carry. You will use what God gave you. His gaze traveled from my face to my form. Not lustful but tactical. Like he was inventorying a weapon. My stomach twisted in disgust. And you will earn his trust. I stiffened. My beauty isn't a weapon, I said quietly. He smiled. Look, pitying. In this world, he whispered, leaning close. Everything is a weapon. The trick is learning which part of you fires the deadliest shot. He straightened. And then, he continued, you will retrieve what he guards most. He tapped the metal table, producing a small black and silver photograph of a device. A strange, compact, steel artifact with engraved codes and a red ring around its middle. This, he said, the legendary cipher unit. A device with enough encrypted data to cripple 5 families and expose 20 years of operations. I stared at the picture. It didn't look dangerous. It looked like something you'd mistake for an overpriced USB at Best Buy. But the tremor in his voice told me it was far worse. It can only be accessed, he said, on the 22nd day of the 3rd month. He held up 3 fingers, then 2. Una sola finestra. 1 window. 1 chance. He said the last words in Italian. Smooth, fluent, precise. And something inside me, some stubborn ember of the girl who once believed she mattered, rose. Without thinking, I answered in the same language. Defiant. Capisco benissimo, I said. I understand perfectly. His eyes widened, not in admiration, but in calculation. A new tool had revealed itself. My bilingual tongue. A key he hadn't expected. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. A handler named Marcos, he said, has been undercover 8 years. He will appear with a tool to copy the device. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. The younger lieutenant didn't turn. He just snapped. Later. Then he continued. We've secured you a job. At one continent restaurant downtown. A perfect front. Follow instructions from the manager. He knows you're coming. His tone shifted, softened but in a way that frightened me more. Your time starts now. His finger tapped my forehead lightly. A gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. Then, as if reading a script written by the devil himself, he said, your family's life depends on your success. I looked at him, the stranger, this architect of my doom, and I nodded. Not because I was brave. Not because I was strong. but because I was a mother. With no other choice. Silent tears slid down my face. Hot and humiliating. He watched them fall. "Good," he said softly. "Fear makes people efficient." He walked out, leaving the door open just long enough for me to hear my daughter crying in the distance. And in that moment, that single shattering moment, I realized I wasn't walking into a mission. I was walking into a war. A war where the battlefield would be my body, my mind, my soul, and the victory was simple. Bring back the codes, or bury my family. Forever. The Continental restaurant gleamed like a palace in the heart of the city. Marble floors reflected chandeliers, crystal glasses shimmered, and the faint perfume of truffle butter and roasted herbs hung like incense. I walked among it all, like a ghost wearing silken heels. Every step echoed my fear. Every smile I forced was a mask that weighed heavier than the ropes of that warehouse. The target Mafia, Miles Vescari, was supposed to come. Twice a month, like clockwork, he appeared. This month, the first expected day passed. No Vescari. I grew miserable, anxious, the air itself seeming thicker, heavier. I watched the doors, the glass, the mirrored walls, but only strangers arrived. The manager slid a discreet text across the table. "He always comes with clients. Watch for a tall man, dark suit, Italian style. His patience is legendary, but so is his suspicion." I nodded silently, fingers trembling as I refilled a wine glass. I was a puppet, my strings pulled by fear, but the prize was clear. Trust him, earn it, retrieve the device, and then the chaos. A drunk man, reeking of bourbon and arrogance, ambled toward me. He tipped his chair, laughed too loud. Before I could react, he leaned, head resting on my chest, eyes wild, smell of alcohol thick and suffocating. "Easy, sir," I whispered, trying to push him gently, but the weight pinned me to my heels. The restaurant erupted in laughter. A few patrons whispered cruelly. Some raised their eyebrows in amusement. I felt humiliation coil around me like smoke, burning every nerve, every instinct. Heat rose to my cheeks. My hands shook. My knees begged me to run. And I did. I fled through the kitchen, past steaming pots, clattering dishes, the chaos of utensils like percussion drums of my shame. I stumbled to the changing room, locked the door, pressed my forehead to the cool wood. I wanted to cry. I wanted to vanish. But I could not. Not yet. Not when my family's life depended on the next move. Somewhere Miles Vescari was coming, and I had to be ready. Some eyes do not see, they pierce. And some moments do not pass, they root themselves inside you. My hands shook as I wiped the last tears from my cheeks. But I returned to the floor, heels clicking lightly against the polished marble, masking my trembling from every patron's gaze. The phone vibrated, a soft insistence that drew my gaze like a magnet. A message. Tall man, dark suit, Italian elegance. Silent, powerful, eyes like he knows centuries of secrets. He will arrive in 15. My breath hitched. The words were clinical cold, yet my chest ached with anticipation. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my pulse. And then he appeared. Miles Vescari. Beautiful, powerful, silent. Every movement measured, deliberate, like a predator whose prey is only beginning to realize its fate. Our eyes locked. And in that instant, I felt him see me. Not my uniform, not my trembling hands, but the unspoken truth of who I was. Something ancient flickered in those dark, calculating eyes. Something that knew fear and courage in equal measure. I swallowed. He did not smile. He did not blink. He just stared. A sudden vibration. My phone. Forgotten on the tray beside me. I grabbed it. A call. Italian. Pretending to be my father. The voice sent a shiver down my spine. Confusing and urgent. My grip faltered. The phone slipped. Grazie a Dio. I whispered reflexively, the words flying from my lips before I even realized. Thank God in Italian. Time seemed to halt. And then his hands, gentle, firm, catching the phone mid-fall. He spoke back in Italian, smooth, melodic, controlled. A spark ignited. A subtle tremor in the universe. The air between us shifted. That moment. A single heartbeat. A single exchange of words in a language that bound us. Changed everything. From that instant, Nothing would ever be the same. The mission, the device, my family, all of it intertwined now with him. And in his gaze, I glimpsed a truth I could not yet name. This stranger who stared into my soul knew more about me than I had allowed anyone else to know. And I knew this was only the beginning. Some touches do not ask permission. Some moments steal your breath before you realize it's gone. I turned away, heart still hammering from the phone incident. My hands clutched the tray like a shield, but my mind raced. An orchestra of fear, curiosity, and something I had not expected, anticipation. And then, he was behind me. Before I could register, before the air could shift naturally, his arms wrapped around me. Instinctive, commanding, proactive. My body pressed against his chest. His warmth seeping through the fabric of his suit. Steady and strong, like the world itself had chosen him as its anchor. The restaurant froze. Glasses paused midair. Forks hovered over plates. Patrons glanced, startled, whispers curling like smoke around us. Even the staff seemed suspended in disbelief. I tried to step back. He tightened ever so slightly. Not harshly, not cruelly, just enough to remind me I could not escape this gravity. "Forgive me," he murmured, voice low, roughened by something I could not name. A flicker of awareness crossed his eyes. He released me instantly, bowed slightly, and walked away, quickly. And then, I did not notice the shadow at the entrance. Marcus, rival spy, waiting, silent, eyes calculating every heartbeat of the scene. And above us, the manager watched from his perch. A faint smile tugged at his lips. This was working faster than he ever dared hope. I swallowed, heart still racing, aware that this encounter, innocent or not, had shifted everything. The mission had begun. The trap was set. And in the heat of that brief contact, I realized, this man Miles Vescari was more dangerous than the codes I had been sent to steal. Because he had already stolen something from me. My calm, my certainty, my breath. And I knew with a shiver that ran straight to my toes, that nothing would ever be the same again. Some silences speak louder than vows. Some glances ask what words dare not. The restaurant doors had barely swung closed behind me when I noticed him outside, leaning casually against the sleek black car. Hands in pockets, eyes fixed on mine with patient calculation. My breath caught. My heels clicked faster than I intended as I approached. He straightened as I neared, and though the city hummed around us, the world seemed to narrow to the space between us. "Miss?" His voice was low, careful, respectful. Every syllable measured, aware of the trembling in my posture. "Yes," I replied, wary, guarded. My chest still pounded from the restaurant chaos. He smiled faintly, a softness hidden behind the edge of a predator's poise. "I don't mean to startle you," he said, "but I'd like to walk with you. Perhaps dinner? Something calm. Something outside this circus." I hesitated. The mission weighed heavily on my conscience. Fear clung to my skin like a second coat. But something in his gaze, not harsh, not commanding, not dangerous, held a reverence I had not felt in years. It was as if he saw not the woman in the uniform, not the scared girl behind the mission, but the pieces of me that still remembered softness, warmth, and the courage to exist. I suppose," I murmured. The words tasted foreign, as if I had spoken them for the first time in a decade. He nodded, the corner of his lips lifting ever so slightly. A silent promise hung between us, gentle, precise, unspoken. He would cherish the softness I feared to show. And so a date was set. Not an obligation, not a command. A choice, fleeting and delicate. But in that choice, I felt a flicker of hope. A flicker that perhaps even in a world of codes, danger, and death, something human, something tender, could survive. Some words tiptoe while others crash. Some glances steal laughter and leave it behind like coins on the floor. The restaurant was dim. Candles flickering like little conspiracies on each table. Soft jazz hovered in the air, mixing with the smell of roasted garlic, seared scallops, and old oak wine. He led me to the table, his hand brushing my elbow. A contact electric enough to ignite nerves, but careful, respectful, teasing just enough to stir curiosity. We sat. Menus opened and closed more from habit than interest. I kept my gaze mostly on the table, fingers tracing the rim of the wine glass. "Tell me about yourself," he said, voice low, measured, eyes never leaving mine. "Where you come from, what made you, you?" I smiled faintly, hiding the tremor in my chest. "I work too much," I said lightly. "Nothing glamorous. Just numbers, schedules, dinners, and coffee too strong for anyone to enjoy." He chuckled softly. "Ah, I see. A secret life of spreadsheets and heroic caffeine." I almost laughed, but something in the way he listened, like I had just spoken poetry, made me swallow it down. The conversation flowed. His questions gentle, probing, teasing. I lied carefully, sprinkling truth like sugar on a bitter cake. Half of me wanted to confess everything, but half of me feared that honesty would unravel me completely. Then quietly he leaned in, so subtle it felt like gravity itself had shifted. "I don't know why," he murmured, "but I want to keep you safe." The words landed like a soft hand on my shoulder. My breath caught. My stomach fluttered like trapped birds. I smiled. "Thank you," I whispered, hiding the truth about who I really was, and what danger stalked every corner of my life. His eyes softened, but the faint curve of a smile hinted he already suspected more than I said. And for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine something dangerously simple. Laughter without fear, wine without trembling, a life touched by care instead of threat. And yet, the mission, the codes, the shadows, all lurked quietly behind my smile. Even as I felt his warmth, even as I tasted the faint sweetness of trust, I knew the game was far from over. But tonight the world had paused, and I allowed myself to pretend that perhaps, just perhaps, safety could feel like love. Marcos did not appear. Twice. The first time I waited at the small corner table, hands gripping the stem of my water glass until my knuckles turned white. Eyes darting toward the entrance. Every shadow threatening, every footstep sounding like betrayal. The second time I paced behind the polished bar, checking the door, the mirrors, the reflection of every waiter and guest. The minutes stretched, elongated, like an old film running too slow. Each tick of the clock a drumbeat in my chest. And still he did not come. The tension wrapped itself around me, tight, suffocating, like a silk scarf turned rope. Every instinct screamed danger. Yet every instinct also whispered, trust carefully, but trust. Meanwhile, he stayed. The target, Miles Vescari, had returned to his corner, calm, unreadable. Yet the moments he looked at me were electric. I could feel the warmth behind his gaze, the subtle weight of his presence that drew me closer, even as fear and duty demanded distance. We spoke, softly, laughing occasionally at small absurdities, his dry humor threading through my nerves like gentle needles, stitching a fragile warmth where only anxiety had lived. I found myself smiling, a dangerous, fleeting, uncontrollable smile. And in his eyes I sensed the reflection of something unexpected. Curiosity perhaps, or admiration, or even something softer. We grew closer with each exchange. A brush of a hand reaching for a menu, a shared laugh over a waiter's misstep. The brief, quiet moments when the world seemed to shrink to only the space between us. Yet beneath the laughter and closeness, my heart never let go of the danger, never let go of the mission, never let go of the device that could decide the fate of my family. So I wondered if even for a moment I could allow myself to believe that he might see me not as a tool, but as someone worth protecting. And that thought, like a spark in dry grass, was as terrifying as it was irresistible. O conscience, thou quiet thief, how silently you steal the strength from a woman's resolve. Everything felt too easy, too smooth, too perfectly arranged, as if fate itself were holding its breath and waiting for me to fall. The message arrived at dawn, its vibrations sliding across my nightstand, like a serpent waking from winter sleep. Final instructions. I read them with hands steady on the outside, but trembling beneath the skin. 22nd day, 3rd month. Take the device from his private room. Marcos will meet you there. So simple, so clean. A blueprint drawn by men who did not have to feel, who did not have to betray anything they loved. I stared at the text until the letters blurred, until the morning sun spilled across my bed sheets. Like spilled truth. A strange stillness overtook me, a heaviness that sank into the bones, as if shame itself had found a chair and sat beside me. Because somewhere along this deadly path, between whispered conversations and stolen glances in candlelit corners, between the way he said my name, like it was a secret worth holding, between the gentleness I did not expect from a feared man, I felt something shift. In him, in me, in the space between us. A guilt I could not swallow. A tenderness I could not deny. A feeling I had no right to name. No, not yet. But something dangerously close. A soft treason of the heart. I tried to reason with myself. My family. My duty. The deadline that could kill us all. But each argument fell apart. Like burnt paper touched by wind. For the first time since the nightmare began, I feared not the mission, but the moment he would look at me, and see the truth in my eyes. That I was the storm he never saw coming. That I was the knife he welcomed. That I was the betrayal warming his palm. The day was approaching. The 22nd. The month marked with dread. And I, the woman chosen to deceive, found myself praying that somehow my heart would harden again, before it was too late. The morning he left for business, I felt the world tilt a little, as if the earth itself knew. I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. He kissed my cheek, gently, like a man who had finally found a place to rest. And I smiled back, a smile stitched together with guilt and borrowed courage. Before stepping into his car, he turned to me with that quiet gravity he carried like a second skin. My home is yours today. Whatever you need, it is safe. Safe. If only he knew. His convoy rolled away. 3 black SUVs swallowing distance, and taking my breath with them. The house grew still. Too still. Even the air felt staged, like a silent audience waiting for my cue. His security team hovered nearby, professional, expressionless, their trust misplaced in a woman whose heart was splitting in two. But their presence did not scare me. Real danger wears a familiar face. And danger arrived at noon. A soft knock, 3 taps. The signal. Marcos slipped inside the house like a shadow that had rehearsed the motion. His clothes were darker than his intentions, and his eyes carried 8 years of espionage and exhaustion. He didn't waste time. Here, he whispered, pressing a slim device into my hand. Cold metal. Small enough to hide in a fist. Heavy enough to change destinies. This will copy the codes in under 60 seconds. I nodded, unaware that even his breath was a lie. He moved through the house with surgical precision, fingers dancing across panels, screens flickering, angles freezing mid-motion. Cameras are looped, he muttered. You have the window. Do not hesitate. Hesitation. He said it like a sin. I swallowed mine. His private room was colder than the rest of the house. A fortress carved from quiet wealth and hidden power. My hand trembled as I touched the door. Not from fear. From betrayal. I entered. The soft click behind me sounded like the sealing of fate. His desk stood waiting. The small polished device glowed faintly, as if it recognized me, or sensed the treason in the air. I inhaled deeply, placed the copying tool against it. A small light blinked. Once, twice. Then a slow, serpentine pulse. Popping. My heart beat in time with it. What I did not know, what Marcos never intended for me to know, was that the device had been sabotaged long before it touched my hand. The power. The secret every mafia in America would kill for. It wasn't being copied for my mission. Not for my family. Not for the scarred boss who owned my debt. No. It was being sent to Marcos's real masters. A different crew. A different enemy. A betrayal inside a betrayal. I stood there thinking I was saving my family, never knowing I had just lit the fuse for a war I could not yet see. The final blink turned green. Complete. My knees nearly gave way. I had crossed the threshold. There was no turning back. The cold night air kissed my cheeks as I stepped out of the mansion, my pulse beating like a warning drum against my ribs. My palms were still trembling from the weight of the device, the weight of betrayal I didn't even know I carried. I dialed the young mafia lieutenant, the one who first tested me, the one who stared straight through my fear and still chose me. My voice was barely a breath. I'm done. I have it. His reply came sharp, tense like metal striking stone. Good. Step outside. I'm parked to the left. Car door open. I lifted my eyes. Left corner. Black sedan. Door open like a mouth waiting to swallow me. My legs felt weak, but duty dragged me forward. One step, then another. The night was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears like hands preparing to close. I reached the curb, and then, boom, a roar split the world in half. Heat slapped my face. Light swallowed the sky. The car lifted like a toy kicked by a giant. Then I flew, not forward but sideways. Across the pavement, my body spinning, the air ripped from my lungs. I hit the hood of another car so hard the metal screamed. Glass rained over me like angry stars. Men shouted. Boots thundered. A siren wailed from somewhere inside my bones. For a moment I didn't know if I still had a face, or a future, or a name. My ears rang as if the world were underwater. My vision flickered, blue, black, then red. Smoke rolled across the lot, thick as a nightmare. I tried to breathe, but fire has a way of stealing oxygen before it even reaches you. Through the smoke I saw shadows, men running, rushing toward what remained of the car. Or rather, what remained of him. The young Mafia lieutenant, the one who trusted me, who texted me, who ensured I was perfect for the task, was gone. Not by fate. Not by the rival Mafia. By Marcos. The truth snapped into me like a bone breaking. He didn't want the young Mafia to get the real file. He didn't want anyone to know the device had already been wiped clean by his own tech team. He didn't want loose ends. So he ended him. And the explosion meant to silence him forever had nearly taken me too. The taste of betrayal felt metallic in my mouth. My fingers clawed at the pavement as I tried to sit up, my ears buzzing, my skin burning. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Just smoke. Just pain. Just the dark hands of unconsciousness dragging me backward, whispering, "Shame, you've stepped into a fire you may never walk out from." The world ended in fire. But I woke up in arms. Not conscious, not fully, but aware in that strange twilight way where pain becomes a distant drum. Between the ringing in my ears and the smoke blurring the night, I didn't see him at first. But he saw everything. He was there. Not in another country. Not on business. Not gone. The target Mafia. The man whose eyes once swallowed my breath, whose voice had become the quietest addiction in my ribs, was right there, sitting in a tinted black Jeep parked at the far end of the lot. Watching. Studying. Protecting, silently, like a ghost with a heartbeat. And when the explosion ripped through the air, when the sedan burst into flame, when my body flew like a broken, discarded thing, he moved. Not with hesitation. Not with fear. Not with calculation. But with something raw and unguarded. The kind of urgency a man feels only once in a lifetime, when he realizes the person in danger might very well be the one thing he didn't know he needed to breathe. He ran toward me, boots striking pavement like war drums. Smoke clawed at his face, flames blowing back from the wreck. Someone shouted his name. Another yelled that it was dangerous. He didn't stop. He didn't answer. He didn't blink. He reached me. And everything in him, every bone, every breath, every drop of blood, shifted from power to panic. He dropped to his knees beside me. My vision was nothing but blurred lights and ringing silence, but I felt him, the warmth of his shadow, the tremor in his hands, as they hovered over me, unsure where to touch first. Then he whispered my name, quiet, desperate, breaking, and he lifted me, slowly, gently, into his arms. I felt the world sway, the heat of his chest, the urgency in his breath. He carried me like a man carrying a vow. He didn't take me to a hospital. Hospitals require answers. Hospitals require reports. Hospitals require truth. And truth in this world kills faster than bullets. So he took me to his private medical wing, hidden beneath his estate like a secret cathedral of steel and silence. A place no rival, no spy, no police, no Marcos could ever reach. They rushed toward him when he entered. His private doctors, his medical guards. But he didn't hand me over. Not yet. He looked at me again first, studying every bruise, every cut, every trembling breath. Then he whispered, "If she dies, I die with her." And only then did he let them take me. 2 weeks of slipping somewhere between life and memory. 2 weeks of drifting in that quiet fog where dreams bleed into echo. But even in the haze, even in the blurred whisper of drugs and stitches and pain, I felt him. Near me. Beside me. Always. I heard the scrape of his chair each time he shifted. I sensed his exhaustion when he rested his forehead near my hand. I caught the low murmur of his voice on calls, ordering protection for my family, cursing Marcos's name, threatening whole empires for what happened to me. Sometimes, I felt his fingers brush mine. Barely there, barely brave, but real enough to stay in the bloodstream of my dreams. He didn't leave my side. Not once. Not for a meeting. Not for sleep. Not for business. Powerful men don't guard bedsides. But he did. What kind of man stays for 14 nights without rest? What kind of danger do you become to a heart like that? And then, my lungs unclenched. Light filtered through my eyelids. I fought the weight holding them down. My lashes lifted. And the first thing I saw was him. Head bowed beside my hand. His fingers wrapped around mine. Like he'd been holding on for dear life. His eyes snapped open, dark and wild. As if hearing me breathe was the sound of salvation itself. I tried to speak. Only air came out. A broken whisper. But he heard it. He always heard me. His hand tightened around mine as he leaned in, his voice cracking like something sacred had split open. You came back to me. And I, broken, bruised, stitched and trembling, realized something terrifying and true. I didn't just come back from the explosion. I came back to him. I woke to the softest thing in the world. Not light, not silence, not even breath. It was the clean smell of fresh sheets, linen warm from a dryer, touched with something expensive and barely there, cedar, bergamot, and the faintest trace of a man who never should have smelled like safety. And beneath my cheek, a heartbeat, slow, steady, unmoving like he'd trained it not to leave without me. I blinked against the haze, my eyelids heavy, stitched with pain and exhaustion. But the moment they lifted, there he was. Miles Vescari. Not target. Not mission. Not enemy. Just Miles. Sitting beside my hospital bed in a simple black shirt, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hands folded like a man guarding a prayer. His hair was uncombed, shadows bruised the space beneath his eyes, and his jaw carried 2 weeks of stress carved into bone. He wasn't supposed to look human, but he did. Painfully so. His eyes lifted the moment I breathed differently, as if my lungs had spoken his name. For a heartbeat he didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me like I was the first sunrise after a long winter war. And for a moment I forgot pain had a home inside my body. My throat burned when I whispered, Where is my family? The question wobbled out of me, thin and terrified. The fear inside my chest rose so fast it clogged my breath. He didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, Miles leaned forward, slow like he didn't want to startle a wounded animal, and held my gaze. His eyes were not cold like the rumors. Not cruel like the world insisted. Not unreadable like Mafia legends whispered. They were warm, heavy, carrying something that made my heart clench. Promise, guilt, fury, devotion. A hurricane wrapped in tenderness. He reached for my hand, then paused like asking silent permission. I didn't pull away. His fingers brushed the back of mine, hovering as if his touch might shatter me. Then gently, Fifi, he laced our hands together. His voice came last. Oh, rough. Something close to breaking. They're safe. 2 words. Just 2. But the way he said them, the drop in his tone, the tremble he tried to hide, the way his thumb brushed my knuckles, told me everything he hadn't spoken yet. Safe because he made them safe. Safe because he watched them, guarded them, protected them while I lay here half alive. Safe because Miles Vescari, the man I was sent to deceive, had crossed lines for me that men like him were never supposed to cross. I stared at him, my heart twisting. You saw them? His jaw tightened. He didn't nod, didn't brag, didn't explain. He just said softly, Rest. Your family breathes because you still do. Those words settled over me like a blanket, terrifying and comforting at the same time. And as I closed my eyes again, exhaustion pulling me under, one truth hit me with the force of that explosion. I had been sent to betray Miles Vescari, but he had been saving me long before I ever realized I needed saving. The world outside my hospital window moved like it always did. Cars, sirens, distant voices. But inside, a storm was taking shape that no one could see. I didn't need to hear the news. The air carried it, heavy like smoke from a fire that hadn't yet touched my skin. Marcos, the man who had guided me, who had watched over my every step, who had whispered instructions and reassurances, had killed his own brother. 8 years. 8 years he had been a spy. 8 years he had been planted into Miles Vescary's life to retrieve the device. 8 years of lies, and now the lie had become murder. Word traveled faster than light in this world. The Mafia boss with scars, the man who had haunted my nightmares with fire and shadows, heard. He heard, and his fury was a storm without warning. He swore revenge. Not tomorrow, not next week, but immediately, with a patience only a predator could master. He plotted in silence, letting his rage ferment like venom behind steel bars. Every agent, every soldier, every hand in his empire was now in motion. The hunt was no longer about the device alone. It was about blood, legacy, betrayal, and the device, the cursed key to all power, was still in play. Miles Vescary held it now, unaware of the full chaos that had erupted behind the shadows. And yet, that very chaos was the heartbeat of the game. It wasn't just a war over information anymore. It was a war over trust, loyalty, and survival. I could feel it in my veins even as I lay recovering, the tension of men unseen, machines whirring in secret rooms, the silent threats that carried the weight of death without ever touching skin. Marcos's betrayal had lit a fuse. A war had begun that would stretch across cities, families, and centuries of hidden power. And at the center of it, I was still breathing, still alive, still human, and still, unknowingly, irrevocably, part of it all. I begged. My voice shook like a leaf caught in a storm. "Please, just let me go," I whispered, each word trembling with fear, exhaustion, and shame. Miles Vescary didn't speak immediately. He just took my hands, guided me gently to the car. The leather seats smelled faintly of cedar and danger, the kind that clung to men like armor. Once we arrived at my modest home, he didn't release me. Not yet. Not until he had anchored me in place. His hands rested softly on my shoulders, firm enough to hold me, tender enough not to hurt. I shivered at the weight of him. Power, patience, danger, all wrapped in the warmth of a man who could destroy me, yet chose to cradle me instead. And then he spoke. I already knew. The words fell slowly, like a knife wrapped in velvet. He had known. From the first day. Every glance, every gesture, every false smile, every lie I told, he had studied it. And yet, he didn't recoil. He didn't punish. He didn't betray. I investigated you, he continued, voice low and dangerous, and I saw who you were, and who you could be, and still. He let the word hang. The silence cut deeper than any bullet, sharper than any blade. I fell in love. I froze. Breath caught in my chest. My heart raced as if it were trying to outrun the revelation. How could a man who had known my lies, my secrets, my mission, fall for me? Yet there he was. Miles Vescary. A storm wrapped in silk. A danger I could never outrun. A man whose love was more terrifying and more tender than any threat I had ever faced. In that moment, my body remembered what my mind could not yet comprehend. Love was not safe. Love was not rational. And love was entirely, irrevocably, Miles. The continental restaurant smelled of polished wood, fresh linen, and the faint tang of wine, memories of chaos still lingering like ghosts between the tables. I walked in, heart hammering beneath my ribs, senses sharpened to a knife's edge. Every corner, every shadow seemed alive, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Miles Vescary stood beside me, silent, protective, a presence I could feel even without touching. His eyes scanned the room, calculating, measuring. Every instinct told him this was no longer just about me. It was about every move I had made, every step I had taken, every plan that had been whispered to me in secret. I wanted answers. Needed them. Who had been watching? Who had moved while I thought the world slept? The manager, supposed to guide me, to give me cover, to be my eyes and ears, was gone. Vanished. The registers were wiped. Reservations deleted. Even the menu seemed newly pressed, as if no one had ever dined here before. Someone staged this, I murmured, tracing my fingers over the polished oak of the bar. Someone erased everything. Every trace of my mission. Miles' jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. His presence said it all. The danger was closer than I had thought. And yet he did not flinch. Not from me, not from the shadows. I realized, in that heartbeat of silent terror, The world I had stepped into the heart of the Mafia, into lies, into codes, was more ruthless, more cunning, and far more alive than I had ever imagined. Everything I thought I had done, every careful step, could vanish in an instant. And yet, I had Miles Vescry at my side. A man who saw the truth in me, who would protect me even when the entire world tried to erase it. I drew a shaky breath and whispered to no one but myself, "So it begins again." And with that, we moved forward into the silent, waiting shadows of the Continental. The world had begun to breathe again. After everything, the mission, the explosion, the betrayal, Miles insisted on taking me somewhere soft, somewhere human, somewhere that wasn't soaked in blood or secrets. So he chose a quiet restaurant at the edge of the city, a place with warm lights and gentle music, where the air carried the soft perfume of roasted garlic and fresh basil. He said it would help me find myself again. He didn't understand that I had been lost long before him. We sat tucked in a corner booth, the velvet pressed against my spine like a mothering hand. Miles watched me not with suspicion but with tenderness. A tenderness I feared, and yet I leaned toward without thinking. And then, my entire breath vanished. He walked in, the father of my child. The man who once hollowed my chest and left me to fill the emptiness alone. The man whose lies birthed my shame. He froze mid-stride, mouth slightly open, eyes widening the way a sinner recognizes the ghost of his own sin. I felt the room tilt. He took a slow step toward me, then another. His gaze darted to Miles, then back to me, as though trying to measure who owned me now, who sheltered me now, who I had become in his absence. My trembling fingers clutched the edge of the table. I could hear my pulse over the cello music. Miles felt it. He always felt me before I spoke. "Who is he?" he asked softly. "He's the past," I whispered, voice cracking like old glass. The man, my past, turned away suddenly and slipped outside. But I knew that look, that old, familiar hunting look. He was not ready to let me vanish from his narrative. When Miles took my hand to leave, a chord of fear sang low in my chest. And I was right. His car followed us. Miles' men were already trailing behind us, their black SUVs gliding like shadows with engines that purred danger. I saw them glance at each other as the familiar old sedan kept appearing in the side mirror, inch for inch, breath for breath. A message passed between them with no words spoken. Then, brakes screeched. Metal roared. Miles' men boxed him in with terrifying precision. I heard shouting. Saw doors fly open. Men with hard eyes and silent loyalty stepped out. One raised his weapon and fired. Bang. A clean shot. Straight through the tires. The car dropped like a wounded animal, sparks scraping the asphalt. My daughter's father froze inside, eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in him before, not even in our worst moments. One of Miles' men leaned in, voice cold as iron. "You follow her again, and you will not walk away the second time." No yelling. No threats. Just quiet, deadly truth. He lifted his hands, shaking, ashen, small. He wasn't a monster anymore. Just a man who once broke me, now broken by the life he never understood. He backed away from everything, from me, from Miles, from the road of his own regrets, and vanished from my story forever. Miles slid back into the car and looked at me with a gentleness so sharp it almost hurt. "You're safe," he murmured. For the first time in years, I believed it. Night had a strange way of settling around Miles' house. Quiet, velvet dark, soft enough to trick you into believing danger slept. I was seated on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still carried the faint scent of hospital disinfectant and Miles' cologne. My body felt alive, but my spirit still trembled from the explosion, the betrayal, the ghost of flames licking my memory. Miles stood by the tall window, half shadow and half man, his silhouette carved sharp by the moonlight. Then his phone vibrated, a single sharp buzz that sliced the silence. He lifted it, looked down, and everything in him stilled. Not froze, stilled like the moment before lightning breaks. I rose slowly, my heartbeat skittering. "Miles." He didn't answer at first. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he turned the phone so I could see. A message. No name. No number. Just words that felt like the cold muzzle of a gun pressed against my spine. "Surrender the device or she dies." My throat closed. Miles exhaled once, slow and controlled. Too controlled. The kind of calm that comes only to men fluent in violence. He thinks he knows how to touch my weakness, he murmured. My knees softened. Marcos, I whispered. He nodded once. The name tasted of rust and betrayal. The worst part, Marcos believed Miles had the true device. He didn't know the truth. Miles never moved with the real device. The one Marcos stole, the one Marcos killed for, was a hollow carcass. Used. A brilliant, worthless shell. But Marcos didn't need truth. He needed leverage. And I was the leverage. Miles slipped a gun from the back of his waistband, checking the chamber with a whisper-quiet click. He looked like a man made entirely of decision. Not panic. Not emotion. Decision. I will not let him touch you, he said softly. His voice had weight, like a vow forged in iron. But before I could speak, another message came in. The phone buzzed violently. Miles opened it. His jaw tightened. A video. The screen lit up with Marcos's face. Sweaty, frantic, desperate in that unhinged way traitors look when their lies begin to choke them. Behind him, the warehouse walls were rusted and damp. The camera angle jerked as if he were holding the phone with trembling fingers. He hissed into the lens. Miles, you have 1 hour. Bring the device. Or she disappears from this world. Miles paused the video. His knuckles whitened around the phone. I swallowed. Miles. He doesn't have me. Not yet, he said, voice quiet, deadly. That message wasn't a threat. It was a promise he intends to fulfill. He turned, grabbed his jacket, slid a second weapon into the holster at his chest. Then he handed me something small. A thin, black, discreet panic transmitter. For me, he said. In case I can't reach you in time. The words hit me like a bullet of truth. He wasn't just preparing to fight. He was preparing to bleed. Before I could protest, alarms blared through the house. A security breach. Miles spun, eyes hardening. Too late, he whispered. Glass shattered in the hallway. Boots thundered against marble floors. Shadows swarmed in from every corner. Marcos hadn't waited. He had sent men. Miles grabbed me, pulled me behind him, and raised his weapon. The house erupted into gunfire. Violent. Too loud for breath. Too fast for thought. But over the chaos, over the bullets, over the shouted commands, Miles' voice cut through, fierce and unshakable. Stay behind me. I will not lose you. And for a heartbeat, I believed him more than I believed my own pulse. The night felt swollen with secrets, thick with the breath of men who would gladly drown the world just to hold power in their fists. Miles paced the quiet room like a storm trying to find its shape, and I sat on the edge of the long oak table, watching him fight with thoughts he hadn't yet spoken. Every wall in his private war room glowed with screens, maps, intercepted calls, blurred satellite feeds. All empty, all cleaned, all erased. The Scar Mafia had scrubbed every trace of my family's location as if they never breathed the same air as the rest of us. Miles had spent days trying to crack their silence, and each failure deepened that shadow under his eyes. The shadow of a man whose brother had died for nothing but a traitor's ambition. I pulled in a breath. Miles, what if they've already? He turned sharply. No. A single word. Flat. Certain. Unshakable. My instincts haven't failed me yet. I didn't know if that was comfort or a curse. He approached the screens again, tracing the air with his fingers as if trying to touch something hidden between the pixels. Then he stopped. His posture shifted. Something in him clicked. He turned slowly toward me. 2 enemies, he murmured. 1 device. And both believe they can use you to get it. He stepped closer. The room felt smaller. More dangerous. Marcos wants redemption, he continued. He betrayed my family, killed his own brother, destroyed alliances built over years. And for what? A device he still can't access. I swallowed. Marcos, the man who once smiled like a handler but touched death with casual hands, now hunted me like I was the last thread saving him from execution. And the Scar Mafia, Miles said, voice lowering. They want power. The device is their throne and your family is their leash. My breathing hitched. My family, somewhere in darkness, waiting, terrified. I whispered, so what do we do? Miles leaned his palms on the table, the screens behind him painting his face in cold light. He folded into the posture of a man who no longer saw chaos, only opportunity. We make them destroy each other. My eyes widened. Miles. He lifted a hand. Listen. His voice dropped to that quiet, lethal softness that always made my heart stutter. I know Marcos's fear, he said. I know the Scar Mafia's pride. And I know exactly which lies they're both willing to bleed for. He stood fully now, towering not just in height but in intention. Every word that followed had the weight of a vow hammered into steel. I will make Marcos believe the Scar Mafia has the device. And I will make the Scar Mafia believe Marcos has the real one. And they will come for each other like wolves starved of reason. He moved closer. His hand brushed my cheek, gentle, reverent, almost frightened. And we will take your family while they tear themselves apart. Not a bullet fired by me, but a war they start themselves. I felt the breath leave my body. Miles Vescari was not just powerful. He was surgical. Beautifully dangerous. His eyes met mine, unwavering. I will not let the world you fear fall on you again, he said. I will not allow your family to die in darkness. And I will not let two enemies control the woman I. He didn't finish, but his silence said everything. My throat tightened. My fingers trembled. And for the first time, I believed we had a chance. A fierce, terrifying, beautiful chance. The kind of chance people die for. The kind that could rewrite every fate chasing me. The night dripped with tension, heavy, metallic, thick enough to taste. Miles' plan wasn't born of chance. It was carved, measured, engineered with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a betrayed brother. I stood in the darkened safe house room, watching him finish the final touches of his deception. His fingers moved swiftly across encrypted screens, sending messages that would soon become gunfire. One message to Marcos. One message to the scarred Mafia boss. Both lies. Both deadly. And both carried my face as the silent trigger. My heartbeat thrummed in my ears as Miles straightened, slipped on his dark coat and checked his holster one last time. You're shaking, he murmured. I'm not, I lied. He stepped closer, brushing a thumb across my jaw. Gentle, grounding, terrifying. They will come tonight, he said quietly. Not for you, but for each other. His voice dropped to a whisper, a vow wrapped in danger. And I will be there before the first scream. Miles chose the battleground with intention. A deserted commercial loading yard near the river. Empty warehouses, wide concrete lots, and shadows deep enough to swallow a manhole. He didn't watch from a balcony. He didn't hide behind elite glass towers. He hid where death hides. In the shadows. Close enough to hear the breath of the men he planned to destroy. Close enough to become the ghost guiding their bullets. I stayed inside the armored vehicle, watching through the cracked window, praying the night would not eat the man who had become my unexpected shelter. Miles moved like ink in darkness. Silent, fluid, unseen. 11:52 p.m. 3 black SUVs rolled in from the east. Marcos, the traitor wearing desperation like sweat. He stepped out first, nervous, trembling, eyes scanning for threats he didn't yet understand. 11:54 p.m. 2 armored vans arrived from the west. The Scar Mafia, led by the scarred boss himself. His monstrous face a map of violence, his men rigid in formation around him. The moment he stepped into the yard, the air seemed to crack. His voice boomed. Where is my device? Marcos flinched, then shouted back. You stole it from me first. A lie. A perfect lie. Crafted by Miles. The scarred boss snarled. No one steals from me. Not even a dead man's brother. Marcos stiffened. His hand twitched toward his gun. Miles whispered from the shadows. Good, take the bait. I saw him barely. A silhouette. Moving. Watching his plan unfold like a playwright who knew the ending before the first act. Then, as if the night snapped in half. A single gunshot. Not from Miles. Not from his men. From panic. From pride. From chaos. Marcos's bullet struck the scarred boss's right-hand soldier. And that was the match. The Scar Mafia erupted. Gunfire shredded the air. Marcos's men ducked, firing wildly. Sparks danced across metal crates as bullets ricocheted. Smoke exploded from the ground where grenades cracked. Men screamed. Men fell. Men ran. 2 armies, each believing the other had the device. 2 enemies, each believing the other was the thief. All because one man whispered the right lie at the right time. Miles did not move at first. He waited. He waited. He listened. Then when the battlefield was drowned in gunfire and panic, he stepped out of the shadows like a prophecy. Silencer on. Swift. Precise. He didn't fire to kill, only to guide. A shot to a knee here. A gun knocked from a hand there. A distraction that made one faction shoot the other in the back. A puppeteer hidden in plain night. A whisper of death where no one knew he breathed. I watched, heart in my throat as blood soaked concrete. And still Miles moved untouched, unseen, invincible. This wasn't a war. It was a symphony. And Miles Vescry was the conductor. Minutes later, silence. The yard was littered with the bodies of two organizations who never knew the real enemy stood between them. Miles exhaled, holstering his gun. Then he turned toward the armored vehicle. Toward me. And he walked back through the battlefield he had orchestrated, without firing a single deadly bullet. Just as he promised. The night air smelled of rain and iron, thick with the aftermath of chaos. Smoke curled upward from the yard where the two rival factions had bled themselves dry, each believing the other had betrayed them. Miles emerged from the shadows like a wraith, moving with the calm certainty of a man who had already seen the truth. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. His eyes scanned the battlefield, checking bodies, listening for the faintest sign of life. A twitch, a groan, a shallow breath. Anyone lying? He muttered under his breath, fingers grazing the pulse points of fallen men. Each check was precise. Carotid pulse, radial artery, the subtle lift of a chest. Miles knew life's telltale rhythms better than a doctor. Satisfied that all threats had been neutralized, he turned to the task that mattered most: locating my family. He moved to his armored SUV, opened a hidden drawer and retrieved a high-frequency tracker. Handcrafted, military-grade, calibrated to pick up even the faintest digital signal. It was synced to my phone's last known coordinates, my daughter's watch, and a few small devices we had planted weeks earlier. The beep of the tracker hummed steadily as he drove through the maze of Atlanta's outskirts, every turn calculated. He passed abandoned warehouses, overgrown lots and silent streets, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Each signal was cross-referenced with city grids, utility lines and road cameras. Finally, the tracker led him to a seemingly empty, rusting warehouse on the far edge of the industrial district. Its walls were weathered, paint peeling, metal rusted. But beneath its hollow facade, life. He ducked low, checking for traps, booby traps, anything to warn of a final ambush. None. Silence reigned, broken only by muffled cries. Miles pushed the door open. Inside, the air reeked of mildew, sweat, and fear. Shadows clung to the corners. And there, tied, weak but alive, were my parents, my younger sister, and my precious Arya. Starvation had etched lines into their faces, but their eyes flickered at the sight of salvation. Arya. My voice cracked, caught somewhere between sobs and relief. The little girl's arms flung open. Mommy! She ran into me, small body trembling against mine, tears wetting my cheeks. Relief crashed over me in waves so violent I could not stand, and I fainted into her arms. Miles moved swiftly, untangling ropes with surgical precision, his hands never trembling, even as he checked the edges of the warehouse for residual threats. He whispered reassurances to my family, his voice calm yet commanding, carrying the promise of safety. By the time I came to, Arya's face was pressed against mine, and Miles stood back, scanning the perimeter like a sentinel, ensuring nothing could touch us again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed in the simple truth. We were alive. We were free. And the man who had orchestrated our salvation was already planning the next move. The world felt impossibly quiet after the storm. Marcos, the traitor whose betrayal had carved holes into so many lives, was cornered. His smug confidence evaporated like mist in the morning sun. I knew even from where I stood that the man who had orchestrated our survival, Miles, had calculated every path, every escape, every lie. The scarred Mafia, the shadow that had haunted every heartbeat, every whispered fear in my dreams, was no more. Its remnants lay scattered in the streets, disarmed and humiliated, swallowed by the consequences of their own greed. Miles, the device. The very object that had drawn death and deception toward us like a magnet. It was still in his possession. No one else knew where it was. Not Marcos, Not the remnants of the rival factions. Not even the city that had once felt like a cage around us. I watched him move through our small hidden world with the calm precision of a general surveying a battlefield he had won. And I realized he could have crushed us all, erased every trace of our lives, and yet he had chosen another path. Peace returned, slow and deliberate, like a sunrise spilling gold across a quiet sky. Arya slept beside me, her chest rising and falling in innocent rhythm. My parents, my sister, all of them safe, their relief palpable even in silence. And there, in the half-light of a new day, I understood something I had not known before. Survival was not just about escaping death. It was about reclaiming life. Miles stood by the window, watching the horizon as if he could hold the world in his hands. I knew then that the real battle was over. And the quiet that followed was a promise. That for the first time in what felt like eternity, we were free to begin again. I drew Arya close, feeling her warmth, the steady heartbeat of life against mine. And for the first time I dared to whisper into the morning air. We are home. The room was quiet, the soft hum of the city outside barely reaching us. Miles stood near the window, his silhouette outlined by the fading amber of twilight. I felt the weight of everything we had endured pressing on my chest, threatening to bend me in half. Then he turned, eyes soft yet piercing, holding a truth I wasn't prepared to meet. You were sent to break me, he said, voice low, measured. But I was already broken. You only taught me to feel. The words struck me like lightning in the stillness. I sank to my knees before him, the floor cold beneath my hands, shame and gratitude and fear all tangled together. My voice trembled. I'm sorry, Miles. For everything. For the lies, the chaos. For being part of this world you didn't ask for. He knelt, lifting my face gently, his hands firm but tender. The scarred shadows of our past seemed to retreat in that single gesture. Then he pressed his lips to my forehead. Not a kiss of passion, but of reverence, protection, and understanding. In that moment, all the nights of terror, the betrayals, the sleepless fears, they melted into something fragile and sacred. I realized he saw me not as the pawn I had been, but as a woman who had survived, who had loved fiercely, who had endured. Tears welled in my eyes, but I did not shy from them. I let them fall. And as I pressed my cheek against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me feel alive again." Miles' hand rested on the back of my head, steady, grounding. In that quiet room, in that suspended moment between past and future, I felt the first whisper of hope. True, untethered hope. The morning light spilled softly across the suburban Atlanta street, painting everything in gentle gold. The world felt unusually still, as if it too were holding its breath for what was to come. Miles had taken care of the final obstacle, my daughter's father. Not with vengeance, not with cruelty, but with measured precision. He had paid him to relinquish his parental rights. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of protection, so that Arya could grow in a life free from the shadows of betrayal and fear. I watched from the edge of the living room, Arya clinging to my hand, wide-eyed and unaware of the quiet legal maneuverings that had shaped her future. Miles knelt beside her, smoothing her hair back gently, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You are safe," he whispered, and in his eyes, I saw an unspoken vow. No harm will touch her while I breathe. The adoption was formal yet calm. The papers signed, the seals pressed, legal authority shifted. But there was no fanfare, no cameras, no eyes prying into our lives. It was intimate, sacred, witnessed only by those who had endured alongside us. Our family. Then came the marriage. Quiet, simple. No grand cathedral, no social spectacle. Only the soft hum of the city outside, our family gathered, and the solemnity of a bond forged in fire and survival. Miles' hand held mine warm, steady. His eyes met mine, carrying a depth of promise I had never dared to hope for. Arya sat between us, her small fingers entwined in mine, and for the first time the three of us felt like a complete whole. There was laughter, not loud, not performative, but gentle and real. Tears glistened in my mother's eyes, the same mother who had once warned me, who had held me through storms of shame and fear. And as Miles kissed my hand and Arya clapped her tiny hands in delight, I realized. This was the quiet culmination of a life rebuilt. The ceremony ended not with grandeur, but with the soft, enduring echo of love and safety. A calm promise, sealed in whispers, in smiles, in the unspoken understanding that we had survived and we would thrive. I sit by the window of our modest home in the Atlanta suburbs, the evening sun casting long golden shadows across the living room. Aria laughs in the next room, her voice a melody that stitches the torn edges of my heart. Miles sits quietly in his chair, eyes on her, protective, patient, unshakable. I think back to the days when whispers followed me like vultures. She trapped him. She's a disgrace. Those words once pierced deeper than any blade. The man who left, the world that judged, the nights I spent alone. Every one of them was a weight I carried until it became strength. I watch Aria's small hands trace patterns in the sunlight, and I realize the woman I am now is built from the ashes of betrayal, of fear, of relentless survival. Miles' presence is quiet reassurance, his love not flashy but undeniable, his devotion a shield against the chaos that once ruled my life. The world outside remains uncertain as it always has been, but inside these walls, we have claimed our own reality. A life forged not from what was taken but what we chose to protect and nurture. And as I close my eyes, letting the soft hum of home cradle me, I whisper the truth that has become my life's refrain. I was once the girl they mocked. I became the woman they feared. And then, by love, fate, and fire, I became the woman I was meant to be. The words hang in the air like a benediction. The past is a shadow behind me. The future stretches open and golden, a path I will walk with strength, courage, and love. Fade out. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with Serena Caldwell. Your time and support mean the world. If you loved the story, don't forget to subscribe and stay close. We have so many twists, emotions, and adventures waiting just for you. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your curiosity alive.